In the late 10th century, as Christianity spread across Scandinavia, a northern ruler emerged with unmatched resolve and cruelty. His name was King Alaric the Cold, a monarch whose reign marked the final violent intersection between pagan tradition and Christian conversion. Born among the icebound fjords of Uppsala, Alaric rose from the son of a minor chieftain to the supreme ruler of the northern tribes through calculated alliances and relentless warfare. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss more chilling tales from history's darkest corners. Alaric's rise was rooted in his reputation as both a warrior and a strategist. He understood that to rule the fractured lands of Sweden, he needed both terror and order. His campaigns unified rival clans, and through the winter raids, he extended his dominion into Christian settlements near the Baltic coast. He treated warfare not as a passion, but as a method to impose structure. Those who submitted retained their lands under tribute. Those who resisted were erased from records and memory. Unlike many Viking rulers, Alaric viewed religion as a political instrument. He permitted both the worship of the old gods and the new faith, but only as long as both served his rule. Christian missionaries were tolerated when they preached loyalty to the crown, and pagan priests were rewarded if they upheld royal law. This duality created an illusion of tolerance while ensuring that faith remained subordinate to power. Alaric's capital at Frostholm was a fortress built from stone and iron, a rare sight in a world of timber halls. The stronghold stood beside a frozen lake, surrounded by dense pine forests and guarded by a wall of sharpened stakes. Its centerpiece was a cathedral that he had ordered built to demonstrate dominance over both belief systems. Pagan carvings adorned the exterior walls, while within Christian crosses hung beneath antlered idols. The message was unmistakable: all faiths bowed to the king. His court was known for its rigid discipline and precise administration. Records were kept on carved wooden tablets listing taxes, supplies, and troop movements. Alaric demanded efficiency and punished negligence with severity. His advisors included both Christian monks skilled in writing and pagan seers known for their interpretations of omens. Decisions were made only after both reason and superstition had been consulted. Economically, his rule transformed the region. Trade routes from Novgorod to the North Sea passed safely through his lands under strict royal protection. Merchants were taxed but safeguarded from bandits. Silver and furs flowed into Frostholm, funding the construction of armories, ships, and new roads across the snowy expanse. Even his enemies acknowledged that under his rule, the North became organized and powerful, in a way it had never been before. Alaric's army was composed of disciplined units trained to fight in formation, a rare concept among the Viking bands of the time. He employed iron armor and standardized weapons, preferring control over chaos. Soldiers were loyal not to their chieftains, but to the crown, bound by oaths that invoked both Odin and Christ. His personal guard, known as the Frostblades, were feared for their silence in battle and their absolute obedience. Despite his calculated governance, Alaric was known for a cold and unyielding temperament. He believed mercy weakened authority. Punishments under his law were designed to instill fear rather than reform behavior. Thieves lost their hands, traitors were buried in ice, and blasphemers were displayed outside churches as frozen warnings. To him, suffering was a method of preservation, ensuring the survival of order in a brutal land. Religious tension deepened during his reign as Christian missionaries gained influence among commoners. Churches began to rise where longhouses once stood, and pagan symbols were quietly destroyed. Alaric tolerated this shift only to maintain peace, yet he grew wary of the growing allegiance of the people to foreign bishops. The idea that faith might rival royal power disturbed him deeply. To counterbalance the growing Christian presence, Alaric ordered the construction of grand bell towers in northern cathedrals. He claimed the bells would unite the land through their sound, symbolizing harmony under his rule. Yet in truth, these structures represented surveillance and control. He stationed guards at each tower and demanded that every toll be recorded, every silence explained. The bells became instruments of order, echoing his authority across the frozen valleys. As his reign lengthened, Alaric's obsession with control intensified. He introduced new decrees regulating speech during worship and movement during winter. Commoners required written tokens to travel between villages, and priests could not perform baptisms without royal approval. His bureaucratic precision was unmatched but suffocating. Under his rule, obedience was not a choice but an expectation embedded in daily life. Foreign envoys described him as a ruler of logic and ice. He spoke little, smiled rarely, and viewed sentiment as a weakness of lesser kings. Yet even those who feared him admitted that under his governance, famine lessened, trade expanded, and banditry almost disappeared. Order prevailed, though it came at the cost of spirit and freedom. The people obeyed because the alternative was suffering in the cold shadows of his punishment. By the end of the century, Alaric's influence extended far beyond Sweden's borders. Neighboring kingdoms sought his alliance, fearing his military precision. His envoys negotiated treaties with Norse earls and Slavic princes. To his subjects, he appeared invincible, an unchanging presence like the winter itself. Yet beneath the surface, quiet discontent brewed among the faithful who saw his decrees as blasphemy, and among warriors who longed for the freedom of their ancestors. The cathedral bells that marked his rule rang daily across the snow-covered plains. They were symbols of his unity, his strength, and his surveillance. Their deep tones carried through frozen forests and icy fjords, a reminder that Alaric the Cold watched over all. What began as the music of empire would in time become something else entirely. But for now, in the heart of the north, his reign stood unchallenged, preserved in the stillness of endless winter. By the turn of the century, King Alaric the Cold had ruled for more than 2 decades. His empire stood orderly, rich and loyal on the surface. Yet beneath that frozen calm, unrest spread quietly. The church he had built as a monument to unity had become the heart of growing dissent. Christian priests from the south denounced his laws as heresy, accusing him of blending divine worship with pagan customs. Pagan elders, too, whispered that he had betrayed the gods by submitting to foreign symbols. The king viewed both sides with contempt. In his eyes, neither faith nor ideology held value beyond obedience. When reports reached him of priests preaching disloyalty in hidden gatherings, he saw not theology, but treason. His response was not to debate, but to control. He summoned his council and declared that rebellion, whether spiritual or political, would be answered through the very symbols that had once united his realm, the cathedral bells. The idea came to him during a night walk through Frostholm's cathedral courtyard. Snow fell steadily, muting all sound except the deep toll of the iron bells above. Their echoes lingered in the air, heavy and enduring. Alaric saw in that stillness a form of punishment worthy of his rule, a silence enforced by the cold itself. He believed that those who defied the order of the crown should become part of the order they opposed, frozen in place, silenced by the same instruments they had desecrated. In early winter, royal engineers began modifying the cathedral towers. Iron chains were forged by blacksmiths who worked in unheated workshops under strict supervision. Bells were reinforced with new supports and platforms large enough to hold prisoners. The process was recorded by monks in meticulous detail, though none dared question its purpose. To them, the king's will was absolute, and his methods, though grim, were seen as an extension of divine justice. The first prisoners chosen were not warriors but preachers, men who had spoken against the crown's decrees. They were accused of spreading division among the people by calling the king's authority ungodly. Trials were swift and ceremonial, with predetermined outcomes. The condemned were marched to the cathedral square as the townsfolk watched in silence. Alaric observed from his balcony, expressionless, wrapped in a cloak of white fur that blended with the snow. Quick reminder: if you are enjoying, do like the video and subscribe the channel for upcoming historical content. At his command, the prisoners were chained to the great iron bells suspended above the cathedral entrance. Their wrists and ankles were bound with frozen iron links. The winter air was merciless, and the metal burned against their skin. Guards poured water over the chains, which hardened instantly in the cold. The prisoners cried out, but the king gave no signal for mercy. He ordered that the bells be struck once for each name on the royal record of disobedience. The sound that followed was unlike any other. Each toll resonated through the bodies of the condemned, whose screams mixed with the metallic roar of the bells. The freezing air captured the sound, echoing across the empty streets. The people who listened later said the screams seemed to linger, suspended in the frost long after silence returned. To Alaric, it was not cruelty, but demonstration, proof that disorder could be turned into order, that defiance could become part of the structure of obedience. Word of the punishment spread quickly through the kingdom. Villages near the coast spoke of the frozen bells, where voices of heretics had become part of the winter wind. Travelers avoided Frostholm after dark, claiming to hear faint cries when the bells were silent. The clergy protested, but their letters of complaint never reached the capital. Messengers sent to deliver them vanished in the snow or returned stripped of rank. Fear kept both faiths quiet. Alaric expanded the practice. Each major cathedral under his rule was ordered to install bells of iron thick enough to endure the cold. Chains and scaffolds were built according to the Frostholm design. The punishment became standardized and administrative, no longer an isolated act, but a policy of governance. Official records referred to it as binding in frost, described in precise legal language as a deterrent against treasonous speech. The king's bureaucrats measured everything. They recorded how long it took for a body to freeze completely, how many tolls each bell could withstand before cracking, and how long it took for silence to return after each execution. The information was used to improve efficiency, not compassion. Over time, the process became ritualized. Each punishment began with a reading of royal decrees and ended with the tolling of the final bell. Merchants and foreign envoys who visited Frostholm witnessed the aftermath with unease. The cathedral square, once a center of worship, had turned into a place of fear. Ice-covered figures stood motionless beneath the bells, preserved through the winter. Some were buried in spring, but others were left as reminders, their forms encased in frost until the thaw consumed them. To outsiders, Alaric's rule seemed less like kingship and more like an experiment in control through terror. Yet within his court, few dared to question him. The frost blades ensured silence. His advisors justified the punishments as necessary for maintaining stability. Even the scribes who recorded these acts avoided moral interpretation, writing instead about logistics, timing, and temperature. It was administration stripped of empathy, governance by arithmetic and frost. In private, Alaric defended his methods as protection against chaos. He believed the northern people required discipline shaped by the environment itself. The cold, he often said, was not an enemy, but a teacher. Those who could not endure it did not deserve to shape the future of his realm. The frozen bells became his symbol of endurance, an extension of his ideology that pain could purify and silence could preserve order. By the end of his third decade in power, no one in Frostholm questioned the tolling of the bells. Each sound that rolled across the icy plains reminded the people of the king's reach. Even nature seemed to obey him. Snow fell when he decreed, famine retreated when he planned, and rebellion froze before it could breathe. Yet the silence that followed was not peace, but suppression. The bells that once rang for unity had become monuments of fear, and the kingdom beneath them began to lose its soul beneath the ice. The winter of Alaric's final year arrived earlier than any before it. Frostholm's lake froze solid by late autumn, and trade routes collapsed beneath storms that lasted for weeks. The bells that once tolled over the city grew silent as snow buried their towers. For the first time, the king's commands could not control the season. The cold became absolute, answering to no ruler. Inside the fortress, the old king grew isolated. His council dwindled, and his guards rarely spoke. Rumors spread that the cathedral bells had become cursed, their metal absorbing the souls of those bound to them. Monks refused to climb the towers, claiming the air there never warmed even beside fire. Some nights the bells rang faintly on their own, moved by winds no one could trace. When a traveling bishop from Denmark arrived to seek audience, he brought warnings rather than tribute. He told Alaric that the world beyond his frozen borders spoke of judgment. The church, horrified by the tortures, had declared the bells unholy, and the king himself was now considered damned. Alaric listened without emotion, stating only that no foreign priest could judge a sovereign. Yet something in his eyes betrayed unease. Days later, his chief blacksmith reported that the iron of the cathedral bells had begun to crack. The freezing air split their rims, and when struck, They no longer sang with clear tone, but released low, broken moans. Alaric ordered repairs, but no craftsman could approach without trembling. Each attempt to touch the metal resulted in severe frostbite. The bells resisted human contact as if rejecting their makers. The final act came during the Feast of Midwinter, a ritual the king had invented to mark unity between the faiths. He demanded the bells ring in celebration, ignoring the warnings of his priests and engineers. As the first bell struck, the sound fractured into a shriek that rolled across Frostholm. The vibrations shattered ice along rooftops, and the tower walls began to split. The second toll followed, louder, resonating like thunder beneath the snow. Witnesses said the chains that once bound the condemned began to move as if pulled by unseen hands. The bells swung violently without touch, and the air turned bitter enough to burn the skin. The great tower collapsed under its own weight, burying the guards and priests below. When the storm settled, Alaric was nowhere to be found. In spring, when the ice began to melt, the people uncovered what remained of the king near the base of the ruined cathedral. His body was encased in frost, hands outstretched toward the shattered bells. No sign of struggle was found. The bells were never rebuilt, and Frostholm was abandoned within a generation. Travelers who pass through the ruins still claim that, on the coldest nights, faint tolls echo across the snow, reminders of the reign of Alaric the Cold, whose empire froze itself into silence.